students, and welcome to my class. Today I'm going to revise chapter 1 history, since we have already completed for your first and second unit tests, and these days we will just going to discuss in the live class. Perhaps you will be having the better ideas, and you can analyze whatever the chapters that we have accomplished during these past days. So today, as we have already know that chapter 1 is speaking about some questions such as like when, where and how. So this particular title is actually indicating that history happened in such a centuries, history happened in such a places, and history happened some sort of like the problem that actually happened. So that's why we can understand here that how this history actually we talk about. So let us talk about how this history actually indicating about the different periods. So when we talk about the history, it means here the periodization is very important in the history. So we have already learned about the ancient history in some lower classes, and also we learn about the medieval period, which is especially we have learned in the class 7, and in class 8 we will be talking about the modern period, which is very much like a vast discussion. So here therefore the periodization is very important, because each period containing such kind of like events which actually helping us to understand to make our life better in the future. So we will not repeat what actually in the past happened. So history, or we can say that the purpose of studying the history is one of them is this what I am just talking about. So let's see the second point that we will be talking about, that developments in the modern period. Now in each period, in each decades, different rulers have been coming, and then different rulers are actually dominating, and then different rulers are ruling, and their administrative setup, their ways of like a life, their ways of treating each other, and their ways of like what called like controlling the people, and so how their extension, how they are extending their territories. So these are few things are actually we find, and therefore when a person, when a king or emperor is actually ruling, it means that there is some sort of like a developments, or maybe the declination is also taking place. So different rulers came in India, different rulers ruled over here, but the some of the rulers actually did the extremely good, and some of the rulers actually like what call like destroy the whole system. So that is how today even so we can experience. It means some governments have done very good, some governments are actually ruining the system, some governments are actually increasing our GDP, and some governments are actually declining our GDP. So that is how we can see right now even. So let us talk about the third point, that is about the sources of the modern period. Now to talk about the modern period, we need some evidence, we need some clues, we need some sources through which we can believe that this particular incident had happened in the past few decades. So that is how the sources are very important. Therefore different historians, archaeologists, then different travelers are actually giving us the their evidences, and then we are coming to know that such a period, such kind of emperors were existed. So that is how we are talking about. So it may say this particular first chapter, in the 3 points we will be discussing basically. First is a periodization of the history, second is a developments of the modern period, and the third one is the sources of the modern period in Indian history. So okay, now how do we define history? How do we define? Now for example, history is defined as the study of past events. So we define this way. Now we have already understood the different histories, and here the history could be in 3 categories we find, especially ancient, medieval, and then the modern period. So this division history actually simplifies about the analysis of events at each period will be actually recognized through the common characteristics that may exist in that period. And we have already read about ancient and medieval period. So today in this chapter we will begin to know about the modern period. So let us know about the modern period in India especially. You know, modern period, when we talk about not only in India but rest of the part of world also, this particular event has been taken place, and then how people struggle, how people actually have step forward, and then put their life in the risk, and then they have gained such kind of like things which today we can actually see very clearly. So let us see. So the transition from the medieval period to the modern period in India is marked by the decline of the great Mughal Empire. So we know that almost in the 18th century, actually the declination of this Mughal period already happened, and then with the decline of the Mughal, actually, you know, the modern period began. And how this modern period began, especially the arrival of the Britishers, arrival of the Europeans. Of course, Europeans have come in the 1498, especially when we talk about Vasco da Gama. He also part of the Europeans. But the thing is that the way he came, and then the way he treated, the way he was actually dealt with the Indian rulers, about the spices, the precious stones and jewelries, and many other goods that is actually found in India. These are actually things when he supplied and when he took to his country. He did not thought much about ruling, or maybe to become the ruler of this country. But you know, the moment the new groups of the people, especially new groups of Europeans started arriving here, we come to know that this particular groups are actually trying to dominate. You know, the advantages was there at that time, because you know, India being a vast, physically very vast. So here what happened, there were many kingdoms, and each kingdoms are actually fighting for their territories, and trying to extend their territories, and finding so much of what called the space for having a war. And this particular you know, the behavior of this or the narrow mentality of this emperors and kings and all actually made the other Europeans to realize that this particular groups are actually very much possibly they are actually jealous of each other, and so that is the advantage how they have taken. And at the same time, they also have taken the advantage of giving the site of one area, and you know, and when they got the permission to do the business now, at the time they realized that this particular group is not longer much stronger when they had the war and all. So that is we will be discussing in the later period, especially in chapter 4, 3. All this chapter are actually indicating about the how this Britishers actually engage and involved in the war and all. So okay, so that is the how modern period actually we are going to talk about. So here, this period actually also witnessed the decentralization of the power, as many smaller states emerged and declared their independence. Now we come to know that small states, small kingdoms were actually under the Mughal ruler. And once the Mughal was actually declined, you know, some of the actually small kingdoms actually freed from the Mughal ruler, and then they declared themselves the independent. And so how this particular groups of this kingdom in fact started ruling by their own ways. And then here how the division has been also taken place, and then how the British actually cope up with these people, and then how the things started ruling. So that is all about this particular chapter. Then again we will talk about the modern period in the world as well. Now see, during the modern period, not only India but also other countries of the world witnessed several important developments which shape the future course of actions for the entire world. So let us explore some of this discussion in this video. Now see, the first point we will talk about the Renaissance. Now what the meaning about this Renaissance? Now, when we talk about the term Renaissance, actually refers about the rebirth or the revival. when we talk about the revival or rebirth, it is a very much like a unique word. You see, as the name suggests, the Renaissance actually marked the period of revival of the European art and literature, and especially between the 14th and 17th century. So what happened here? Uh, by the emergence of the independent thinking and reasoning amongst the people, which actually impacted the ideas of the people across the globe. And here, see, in Europe country itself, you see the industrial revolution has been taken place. And when the industrial revolution has taken place, you have to understand that how this production actually increased, and then the country started looking for the marketplace from continent to continent, and then how these people benefited from this marketing, and that is actually also part of this discussion. And then again, you can see that machinery, they introduced the machinery production, and also the machine they introduced, and the development of industries actually led to mass production of manufactured goods. And as a result, what happened, they look for the different continents for their market. So that is how actually the things started spreading. But at the same time, you see, the nationalism began. It may say people started caring about their goods. People started caring, loving their goods. Why? Because the foreign goods are coming and dominating. The foreign people are coming and dominating. And when the domination is taking place, it means certainly you will feel, you will be remember what actually you have got. So when you leave your mother tongue, when you leave your country, when they will force you to leave or to give up your culture and norms and rituals, then certainly you will miss them very much. So that is how actually people started realizing that having our own rituals and norms and cultures and costumes and food items is much more better than the foreign goods. So therefore, people started realizing to care their own country and care their own people. So that's why the nationalism also began at this time. So you can understand in India, the spirit of nationalism was actually strengthened when the people actually started challenging the centralization and the misuse of power by the British in the late 19th century. So that is we have got in this chapter. Then again, to know about this modern period, we have already discussed in the previously. So here the sources is very important. Now, what type of sources that is actually required to understand this modern history better? Now, without the source, without the evidence, without the clues, we can't get the modern period to study, and it will not give us the confidence to believe in. So therefore, here first of all we will talk about that some of the records that is actually kept in the museum or in the library of different center. So we will talk about. So first of all, we have got one is official records of the British administration. Now, whatever the incident happened past history, in the past history, suppose people are not keeping any written records to know the things in the later period, then we will not get. Many history has happened in the world, but up to now, very little things are actually read, or perhaps the language which was existed in a long years ago, perhaps that language is not familiar right now. So therefore, some of the language even buried as the passage of the time. So therefore, we have to very much careful in understanding about this records that we get it. So therefore, first we have got here official records of the British administration, and here the British realized that importance of documentation, and meticulously they maintain the official records for the every action taking place under their administration, especially in India. And therefore, there is a large amount of official data for the British period in India, and the British actually ensured that all official paperwork was actually carefully documented and preserved. So that is why today we can read about the history. And then a large volume of this official records of the British period can be also found at the National Archives of India, based in New Delhi. So suppose you happen to go to New Delhi, then you can visit to the National Archives of India in New Delhi, and then you can search the proper documentation which is actually preserved over there. So the Indian Office of Records in London has also maintained official records of the British India. It may say whatever the incident happened, whatever the things actually kept here as a record, it was also kept in the Britain. So here also you can see that the official records of the British administration proved to be the valuable resource for reconstructing the history of the modern period. But here also has the its limitations, limitations in the sense that while writing, while doing some kind of research, some people are some historians or some people writers may change the date, change the incident, change the events what happened actually, and so that's why many changes also have been taken place. So one must remember that these officers records have been written from a British perspective. So now according to their name and fame, they have put this kind of records, but who knows, may not be happen according to the Indian perspectives. So Indian perspective suppose could have been kept the record, it means they could have given the another variety of like clues and evidences. So therefore these are the few drawbacks that we can find. Okay, so anyway, so thus there may have been a possibility that the British overlooked certain issues which were actually relevant for the Indian masses, and then the British may have modified them to suit their administrative purposes. So one ought to be careful while interpreting official records that belong to the British period. So that's why you have to be very careful while studying. Next we have got the books and newspapers and magazines. These are the few things that is actually one of the a source through which we are able to understand about the modern period. So in the modern period, printing facilities were actually easily accessible to the people, and as a result the period witnessed mass a production of books, newspapers and magazines, and historians use these sources to study the prevalent ideas, thoughts and events of the period. Okay, so however this source actually provide information only of the rich educated class and the British. Many sections of the Indian society were still uneducated. As a result of that, this books, newspapers and magazines are actually no use for them to get the information, because uneducated people, how they can read about it, and then they will be passing the information to the others. So whatever they are hearing orally, they may pass it, but then may not be true, may not be continue, may not be people will follow up that. So therefore orally is not much like that possible sometimes. Okay, then the uneducated actually had no use for the magazines and newspapers, that is we understand. So therefore information about the uneducated class of society is a non-existence or a limited at best. Now for example in the tribal areas, when you see the records are actually not much actually maintained, and as a result of that we don't see the many history that is actually happen in them in their tribal societies, because ultimately they are not much educated, and they are not much thinking about the keeping the records. And when you don't keep the record, it means what, that in the next future generation will not come to know about your past events. So such society actually orally they are passing the information, and then it is going on. So that is how we can here understand. So next we have the architecture. Now when we talk about the architecture, it means this particular architecture also part of the modern history, that someone has come and then established their power, and then they stayed over here, and then their power was actually declined. That is how we can understand. So architecture, here some of the architectures, especially like a Rashtrapati Bhavan, Parliament House, huge architectural structures like India Gate are also giving the testimony about the British rule in India. So that is we can understand. And then again accounts of the travelers. Of course in the medieval period also we have seen that varieties of people came to this during the Sultanate period or during the Mughal period, and then they have written the documentation and then pass the message to the others. So these are the things. So here also foreign travelers are also there, especially like traders, missionaries and officials of the British government. These are the people who were there to give the modern period how it actually began and happened. So they are also witnessing about it. So while interpreting the historical sources, we must ensure not being misled by biased information about the British. So these are things we have to keep in mind. So students, this is the revision, the chapter. So in the next class, I will be talking about the chapter 2. So I just suggest you to read it in a very systematic way and keep it in the mind, especially the some important points about this first chapter. Okay. So good, and thank you, and have a great day ahead.